A police officer approaches a black woman standing on the busy street, eyes scanning her like she's just another face in the crowd. He assumes she's nothing special, just an ordinary person who can be easily disregarded. His approach is aggressive and quick, not allowing her a moment to explain herself. The officer demands her ID, accusing her of some trivial infraction, clearly not interested in hearing her side of the story. The woman, surprised by the sudden confrontation, calmly reaches into her bag and presents her identification. But instead of simply checking it, the officer grabs her ID, holding it with a dismissive sneer. He doesn't even glance at it properly. Without hesitation, he rips the ID in half, letting it fall to the ground. With the act of tearing her identification, the officer's arrogance becomes evident. He clearly believes he's above the law and that he can treat anyone as inferior. He looks at the woman with contempt, assuming she has no power, no influence, no way of standing up to him. This is just another day of bullying to him. But as he stands there, satisfied with his action, something changes. The woman remains calm, not giving in to anger, but there's a shift in her demeanor. She straightens up, her presence commanding more attention than before. The officer, still unaware of the mistake he's made, continues to stand there. But then she speaks, quietly at first, but with such confidence that the officer's cocky expression begins to falter. What happens next will completely stun him. The woman reveals her true identity, and it's one the officer never imagined. Her calm voice cuts through the air as she explains who she really is, and the officer's face goes pale. You won't believe the moment when the officer realizes who he's been disrespecting. The smugness, the arrogance, everything about him changes in an instant. His entire demeanor collapses, and panic begins to set in as he realizes the gravity of his actions. It's a stunning turn of events, as the power dynamic flips, and the officer stands there frozen, unable to respond. How will the officer handle the consequences of his actions? And what will happen to him now that he's crossed the wrong person? Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. A woman, seemingly just like any other, walks down a bustling city street. Her outfit is both polished and understated, an elegant blouse paired with tailored pants, simple yet sophisticated. She moves with purpose, her steps deliberate and calm as she navigates through the busy crowd. Her presence is undeniable, but it's not because she's loud or flashy. No, it's the way she carries herself, the quiet confidence she exudes. She walks tall, her posture straight, as though she's unbothered by the chaos surrounding her. She holds herself with the kind of grace and composure that others take notice of. But few would ever guess at the depth of who she is. She's composed, unassuming, but underneath that quiet exterior lies someone with immense power and influence. She's not the type to draw attention to herself or flaunt her status. Instead, she walks in the world with a sense of knowing, of quiet strength. However, to the casual observer, she's just another professional on her way somewhere. Her appearance doesn't scream for attention, and she's just going about her business as anyone else might. Yet, the very way she moves speaks volumes. She's more than she appears to be. Meanwhile, there's an officer stationed nearby. His presence is commanding in a different way. His uniform neat, his posture rigid, eyes scanning the crowd with the kind of alertness reserved for someone who thinks they know everything. The officer watches the woman as she passes by, his gaze lingering for a moment. In his mind, he sizes her up in an instant. She doesn't belong to the category of people he considers worthy of respect. She looks like someone he can control, someone whose presence can be dismissed. The officer, hardened by years of experience, believes in his own power and authority. He's the kind of person who believes that his badge gives him the right to judge, to dismiss, and to exert control over anyone he deems unworthy. His bias is evident, his assumptions unshakable. To him, this woman is just another person to look down on. But what he doesn't know is that this woman, calm and composed as she is, has a level of authority and power that dwarfs his own. As he watches her walk past, he has no idea that his assumptions and quick judgments are about to lead him down a path he never could have imagined. The officer eyes the woman from a distance as she walks confidently past him. To an untrained eye, she's just another person going about her day. But for him, it's different. The officer looks at her, and something about her catches his attention. Although he can't quite put his finger on it, he doesn't see anything particularly out of place. But there's a momentary judgment that stirs inside him. He decides that today, she will be the one to stand out. She's just another civilian in his eyes, someone he can dismiss, someone he can treat the way he treats so many others. It's a power trip, a feeling of control that he's so accustomed to, but it doesn't even cross his mind that he may be wrong. She's just another ordinary person, he thinks. He walks up to her abruptly, blocking her path without any real reason, and says, "Excuse me, ma'am, I need to see your identification." The woman doesn't react with fear or anger. Instead, she simply pauses for a second, a brief moment of stillness. She's composed, unbothered by the officer's sudden intrusion. Without hesitation, she reaches into her bag and pulls out her ID. She holds it out to him with a calm demeanor, clearly untroubled by the unnecessary demand. The officer takes the ID from her, but instead of a quick, efficient check, he holds it in his hands longer than necessary, looking at it as if it's a document that doesn't deserve his time. He barely glances at it and mutters, "This doesn't look real." He scans the ID with a sense of superiority, not even taking the time to actually read it. His voice is laced with arrogance. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" She remains calm, not flinching or raising her voice. "It's a valid ID," she responds quietly but firmly. But instead of simply checking the ID as he should, the officer's judgment grows clouded with prejudice. Without warning, he rips the ID out of her hand, his movement swift and forceful. The paper tears in his grip. The woman watches silently as the officer tosses the torn pieces of the ID to the ground with a dismissive gesture. He looks at her coldly, as if she's beneath him. "You're just like the rest of them," he mutters, still treating her as if she's not worth his time or respect. Just another nobody. For a brief moment, there's a quiet in the air. The woman stands still, composed as ever, not showing any sign of aggression. But the officer's smirk, the look of superiority in his eyes, fades as he realizes he's crossed a line. Unbeknownst to him, his actions will be the catalyst for something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. The woman stands there, the torn edges of her ID scattered at her feet. She remains completely still, her face showing no sign of the shock or frustration that must be rising inside her. She's used to these kinds of encounters, but it doesn't make them any easier to handle. Still, she maintains control. Her composure speaks volumes to the crowd that is beginning to form around them. The officer, however, is anything but composed. His anger seems to grow with every word she speaks. "What? You think you're just gonna stand there and talk your way out of this?" He sneers, stepping closer to her. His face is now twisted with contempt, his hands moving to his hips, clearly eager to show his authority. "I'm not trying to talk my way out of anything," the woman replies calmly, not backing down. "You have no reason to treat me like this. Please, stop." Her voice remains steady, almost serene, despite the growing tension. But the officer refuses to listen. His arrogance only increases, and he now begins to insult her more openly. "You're a joke," he scoffs. "Do you really think anyone's going to believe your side of the story over mine? You're just another ordinary person who doesn't matter." He pauses, glaring at her as though waiting for her to shrink back under the weight of his words. But she doesn't. Around them, people start to gather, their curiosity piqued. Some stand frozen in place, hesitant to intervene. But others are taking out their phones, recording the interaction. There's a sense of discomfort in the air. Some unsure whether they should act, others unwilling to risk getting involved. But the woman doesn't notice the crowd. She's not looking for sympathy, nor does she need it. She's focused solely on the officer in front of her. "You're wasting my time," the officer spits. "You're just another person trying to make a scene. It's people like you who think they can talk back to authority, who think they can make up their own rules. Well, guess what?" He pauses, his tone growing even more hostile. "You can't." As he speaks, his voice rises, drawing more attention. The bystanders start murmuring amongst themselves, but no one steps forward. The officer's voice is now so loud that even those who were initially hesitant to record the incident begin to notice how unjust it is. The officer doesn't seem to care, though. His only concern is keeping control, maintaining his misguided sense of power. The woman, though clearly frustrated, keeps her voice calm. "I'm not making a scene," she says quietly. "You're the one who's escalating this. I've done nothing wrong." The words hang in the air, simple and clear, but the officer refuses to listen. He's convinced that he has the upper hand, that his uniform gives him the right to treat others however he pleases. "Just shut up already," the officer growls, his hands clenching into fists. "You're wasting my time. I'll make sure you regret this." His tone is threatening, but it only serves to fuel the woman's inner strength. She knows she has to stay calm. This situation is about something far bigger than her, something she refuses to let go unnoticed. The crowd watches, some of them recording, some of them shifting uncomfortably. But no one steps in. They're all aware of the imbalance of power here. The officer is the one with the badge, with the authority, while the woman is just trying to go about her day. She doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. As the officer continues to berate her, the woman remains calm, but it's clear to anyone watching that the officer is the one out of control. His words are cutting, based on assumptions and his belief that she is inferior to him. She stands tall, refusing to allow his anger to define the situation. Her patience is starting to wear thin, but she doesn't give in to the urge to retaliate. She won't let him provoke her. Instead, she simply says, "I'm not the problem here. You are." The crowd falls silent for a moment. It's as though the collective realization hits everyone at once. Here is a woman, wrongfully treated, standing firm in the face of an officer who is misusing his power. The injustice is too clear to ignore. But still, no one steps forward. The tension thickens. The officer's anger is building to a boiling point, but the woman's composure doesn't waver. She is resolute, her dignity intact, despite everything he's thrown at her. The woman stands tall, despite the officer's mounting hostility. The bystanders remain quiet, still recording the confrontation. The tension in the air is palpable, but the woman's calmness never wavers. She feels the weight of the moment, knowing that it's time to end this injustice once and for all. As the officer continues to berate her, the woman finally speaks. "You're wrong," she says, her voice steady but powerful, "about everything." The officer pauses, momentarily taken aback by her tone. He seems to think for a moment, but then sneers again. "What are you talking about now?" he scoffs, his arrogance still apparent. "Just go away already. You've been a pain this whole time, and I'm done with it." The woman's gaze hardens, and she looks directly into the officer's eyes. "You're disrespecting the wrong person," she says firmly, every word cutting through the air. "I'm not just some random woman you can push around. I'm the head of a major department in the government." The officer's smirk falters for a moment. "What?" he mutters, clearly skeptical, not expecting such a response. She takes a breath, pausing for emphasis before adding, "I am the chief of staff. I hold a high-ranking position in the government, and you just made a huge mistake." At that moment, the officer freezes. His face pales, his posture shifting as reality sinks in. He stumbles back slightly, trying to process what he's just heard. His confident, arrogant demeanor quickly dissipates, replaced with shock and unease. The woman has just revealed that she is not some ordinary person. She is someone with immense authority, someone whose identity demands respect. The officer's panic becomes apparent. He starts to stutter, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. His eyes dart around, as if searching for a way to salvage the situation. But he knows deep down that his actions cannot be undone. I didn't know," he mumbles, his voice shaky now, a far cry from the boldness he had earlier displayed. The crowd, sensing the shift in power, watches in stunned silence. The officer, now visibly rattled, begins to understand the magnitude of his mistake. The woman, on the other hand, remains calm, unshaken by the officer's sudden panic. She stands tall, unbothered by his flustered state. "You didn't know," the woman replies coolly, "but you sure should have." Her tone is calm, but there's an undeniable edge to it. She's no longer going to let him get away with his behavior, and she's not going to let him think that his actions are acceptable simply because of his badge. The officer stumbles over his words, trying to form an apology, but it's clear the damage has been done. The woman knows that no words can fix the harm he has caused, and his apology feels empty at this point. The realization has set in, and the officer knows that his behavior has been exposed for what it is. In that instant, the woman takes a step back, holding her head high, her dignity intact. She gives the officer a look that says it all, a look that clearly communicates that his actions were wrong, and he will be held accountable. The officer stands there in silence, a flood of panic and regret flooding over him. He is no longer the confident figure he once was. Instead, he is a man who has just realized that power and authority come with responsibility, and that no one is exempt from respect, no matter their position. The woman stands tall, unshaken by the officer's stammering apology. Her composure is unbroken, her calmness a stark contrast to the officer's panic and shame. With a steady breath, she steps forward, not with anger, but with a quiet authority that commands respect. The officer's once assertive demeanor has evaporated, leaving him visibly shaken. "You've crossed a line," the woman says, her voice firm yet calm, making sure every word lands with impact. "Your actions today are completely unacceptable. It's not just disrespectful, it's illegal. You have no right to treat anyone like that, especially not me." The officer, now realizing the full extent of his mistake, begins to stammer, unable to meet her eyes. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry," he says, his voice faltering. "I didn't know who you were. I was just doing my job." "Your job is to protect and serve, not to bully and disrespect people," she interrupts, her gaze unwavering. "You used your position to degrade me because you thought I was just some nobody. But now you know, don't you? I'm not someone you can just push around. She lets the weight of her words hang in the air for a moment, giving the officer no room for excuses. The crowd that had gathered watches silently, some of them looking down, others glancing at each other, all quietly aware of the injustice that has just unfolded. The officer, feeling the full force of her words, begins to backpedal. His hands shake as he tries to apologize again. I'm really sorry. Please, I didn't mean it that way. It was a mistake. I never knew. I don't care about your apology, the woman responds, her voice calm but resolute. What matters now is that you understand what you did was wrong, and you'll be held accountable for it. Her words are clear, her authority now fully established. You'll have to face the consequences for abusing your power. The officer's face flushes with embarrassment. He tries to muster up the courage to explain himself, but the woman isn't listening. She's already made her point, and she's not going to let him shift the blame onto anything else. The woman has spoken, and it's clear she's not going to let this go. Without another word, she turns her back on the officer, her posture regal, her dignity unbroken. She walks away from the scene, leaving him standing there, still fumbling for something to say. The officer is left speechless, unable to regain the confident persona he once wore so proudly. As the woman walks away, the crowd around them remains silent, watching in awe as she holds her head high. She has shown everyone that no matter what someone's role or position might be, nobody is above being held accountable for their actions. Her calmness and strength in the face of disrespect have left an indelible impression. The officer stands there, humiliated, defeated. He knows that this moment will haunt him for a long time. Not only did he abuse his power, but he did so in front of a crowd that saw his fall from grace. The story of what happened between the woman and the officer quickly becomes a flashpoint for something much larger. As the video of the incident spreads across social media, it stirs up conversations about racial injustice, police brutality, and the deep-seated problems with authority. What began as an isolated event now draws national attention as people from all corners of the country begin reacting. The footage, initially just a shocking moment in one woman's life, becomes a symbol of the struggles that marginalized communities face daily. The power dynamics, the overt racism displayed by the officer, and the public's complicity all become focal points for discussion. Viewers react with disbelief. How could this officer, someone sworn to protect and serve, act in such a callous and dismissive way? Why was this woman treated as if she was beneath respect, simply because of her background? The public outrage quickly grows. People across the country express their anger, frustration, and disbelief over the officer's treatment of the woman. The incident sparks a wider discussion about how people of color, especially black individuals, are often unfairly targeted or mistreated by law enforcement. Many people share their own stories of similar experiences, while others voice their support for the woman and condemn the officer's actions. Amidst the growing outrage, the woman herself becomes a key figure in the national conversation. Using her platform and voice, she speaks out against the systemic abuse of power and the importance of accountability. She calls for reforms, demanding that law enforcement agencies put stronger measures in place to ensure that such incidents are not repeated. She urges people to push for change, to stand up against injustice, and to advocate for fairness, respect, and dignity for everyone, regardless of their race or background. The woman's call for accountability resonates with a broad swath of the population. Civil rights organizations, community leaders, and activists rally behind her, voicing their support and demanding justice. Protests erupt in cities, with people gathering in solidarity to denounce police misconduct, racial profiling, and discrimination. The incident serves as a stark reminder of the need for widespread change in policing practices. As the woman's story continues to spread, it leads to widespread public debates about how to address the systemic issues within law enforcement. Discussions about racial profiling, bias in policing, and the need for better training and oversight become central themes in news outlets, social media platforms, and public forums. Her voice, amplified by the media, becomes a rallying cry for those who believe that no one should be subjected to such treatment based on their race or status. Using her influence, the woman pushes for change. She works with lawmakers and organizations to craft policies that address racial profiling, improve police accountability, and ensure that individuals are treated fairly and justly. Her efforts lead to discussions about reforms that could have lasting impacts on how law enforcement interacts with the public, particularly marginalized communities. Her advocacy work becomes an example of how one person's courage can spark a much-needed conversation and inspire collective action. In the aftermath of the incident, communities across the country come together to support the cause. The story galvanizes people to act, reminding them that injustice cannot be allowed to persist unchecked. It serves as a reminder that standing up for what's right, even in the face of powerful opposition, can create lasting change. The woman's resolve, combined with the support of countless others, demonstrates that collective action is a powerful force for justice and reform. The story concludes with a powerful message that resonates far beyond the incident itself. The treatment of the woman by the officer serves as a stark reminder of how essential it is to respect the dignity of every individual, regardless of their race, background, or status in society. No one should be subjected to mistreatment or disrespect simply because of their appearance, their heritage, or their position in life. The lesson here is clear. We must stand up against any form of injustice. Whether it's a situation involving racial discrimination, abuse of power, or even small acts of prejudice, everyone has a responsibility to speak out and take action. The woman's courage to confront the officer and demand respect highlights the importance of standing up for what is right, even in difficult or intimidating situations. She showed that no one is exempt from being held accountable for their actions, no matter their rank, power, or position in society. This story also emphasizes the importance of accountability. It's not enough to simply identify injustice. We must act on it. The woman's ability to use her platform and her position to advocate for change demonstrates the power of standing up for what is right. The actions of the officer were challenged not just by one person, but by a community that rallied behind the call for justice and fairness. Moreover, the story teaches the value of using one's position of influence to make a real difference. The woman, through her status and influence, was able to shine a light on the issue of mistreatment. Her example shows how each of us can contribute to creating a fairer, more just society, using our unique abilities and platforms to confront and fight against injustice. In a world that often overlooks the powerless, she became a beacon of change. As the story comes to a close, it leaves the audience with a strong, motivating thought. Respect and fairness are non-negotiable rights for everyone. Regardless of one's race, background, or position, every person deserves to be treated with dignity. And when injustice arises, we all have the power to stand up, fight back, and make a difference. We are all responsible for creating a world where respect is the foundation of our actions, and where accountability is upheld.